it is extremely important that you are writing well-tested code. Once you get a job in the industry, you're going to find out very quickly that there is a big emphasis on writing tests. And there are a number of different approaches that companies and individuals can take to writing tests. For example, you can take a TDD approach, which is where we write our tests first. It is a test-driven development approach. Or you can write your tests after you have written the code for your components, your functions, etc. But there are also a number of different types of tests. For example, you can write unit tests, which is where you test a unit of code without external dependencies. Or you can write integration tests. These are tests that are also testing a unit of code, but they are testing with external dependencies. There is also a third type of tests that you can write. This would be end-to-end tests. This is using a tool, something like Selenium, usually where you are testing through the UI. So you would almost write a script where the script runs. It literally opens a browser and follows a step-by-step set of instructions to actually test through the browser and the UI itself. Now, generally, developers will not be writing end-to-end tests. The main tests that you're going to be writing are unit and integration tests, and they are the tests that I am going to be covering in this tutorial and in this series of tutorials. I just want to explain the overall reason why we write tests. Now, to do that, I want to give you a scenario. Now, React as a framework and libraries like Redux, the code is very modular. So we have separate files for our components, our reducers, our action creators, which makes it very easy for us to write tests for each of those units of code. Now, let's imagine a scenario where we're working on a large project with multiple developers working on it at the same time. What's going to happen is each of those developers are going to go away and create a feature branch, make changes, and then check in their code and create a pull request to have that code merged into the master branch and ultimately deployed into production. Now, imagine a scenario where we do not have tests. What's going to happen is they're going to make changes and then check in their code. There's not going to be anything automatic to tell us if something is breaking. That means that it's open to user error. So somebody could check in code that potentially breaks our project, and if it got through the gaps and actually made its way into production, it could be a major problem. Now let me give you another scenario where we do have tests, and generally we'll be working in a CI/CD environment where in our workflow we are using an external continuous integration service where whenever we check in our code, all of those tests, regardless if it's 3 or 3,000 tests, those tests are going to be run every time that the developer checks in their code. And it's immediately going to give us feedback. It's going to tell us if our code is breaking, and if anything is broken, it's going to tell us exactly the unit of code that is breaking, so the developer can go back into their branch, fix whatever is breaking, and then re-check in, re-push their code. The advantage of having good test coverage on your projects is that you're going to be more confident in making changes and in your code, and when you try and actually deploy it on production. That's also why if you try and contribute to any open source projects on GitHub, it's not going to be accepted until you've written tests for your code. The main purpose of this video was for me to give you an introduction to the series, but also to cover the basic tooling and configuration of the app that we're going to be working with in the videos to come. Now, in this video, we are going to be building a React Redux application. I will assume a basic knowledge of those frameworks and libraries, but I will be giving you a description of what I'm doing throughout the series and the videos regardless. So you do not need to know Redux to follow along in this video. And although I'm not going to be teaching these libraries in this series, I'm sure that if you are not familiar with Redux, you're going to pick up a few things as well. But again, knowledge of Redux is not required for this series. You're just going to get more out of it. Other than that, as I mentioned, the tooling that we're going to need, you're going to need to make sure that you've installed Node.js on your machine. This is going to come with a package manager called npm that, again, we're going to be using to actually build our application. So make sure you've installed that. Also, I'm going to be working with VS Code. That's the text editor I'm going to be using. Again, this is up to you. You can use any text editor that you like, but I do recommend you checking this out if you haven't already. It is very good. And in terms of testing utility, again, very common with React applications, we're going to be working with Enzyme. But of course, as I have in previous tutorials on this channel, I'm going to be using Create React App to actually get up and running and actually ensure that we can start writing code as quickly as possible. Again, this is just a starter kit actually from Facebook themselves. It's their official starter kit. And it's just a really great way for getting up and running with React as quickly as possible. So let's go ahead and get started with the tutorial. Now, as I mentioned previously, we're going to be working with Create React App. Now, if you don't know, that is a starter kit from Facebook themselves. Again, Facebook created React, so it's a really good idea to at least know about Create React App because it's such a great tool for creating, particularly what I use it for, which is more of a playground environment. If I'm working on some project and I want to figure out how something's going to work, I might just spin up a new Create React application so that I can write some pseudocode and just play around with it a little bit, because it basically is a way of creating a React application with zero configuration. So it's just really easy to use and just allows us to get, to writing code very, very quickly and easily without much effort at all. So what I'm going to be doing in this tutorial is really just showing you the tooling that we're going to be using, but also how to configure the application that we're going to be working with in the tutorials to come, where we're going to actually break up this series into separate videos covering the different parts of writing tests, for React components, writing tests for, different features, different parts of our application, from components to, things with Redux, such as, action creators, reducers, etc. So again, in this video, I'm just going to be showing you how to configure the application that we're going to be working with. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to open up my terminal. Again, if you're working with Windows, or if you're working with if you're working with Windows, then you're going to be working with your CMD, your command line. Obviously, I'm working in Mac, so for those on a Mac computer, it will be easy for you to follow along. But again, if you're working on Windows and CMD, the commands are basically the same. So let's get started. All you're going to need to do to get started is just create a new folder on your desktop. So I'm going to actually do that from my terminal. I'm just going to say cd desktop. That means I've navigated to desktop within the terminal window. Then I'm going to create a new folder. The command for that is mkdir. I'm going to call this testing with React. That's just created a folder on my desktop, so I'll cd into that. CD stands for change directory. So I'm basically within the directory within my terminal window, if that makes sense. Again, just follow along if it doesn't, and I'm sure in time you'll figure out what I'm trying to explain to you. But let's go ahead and do that. So React testing with React. And as you can see, that is the folder I am within the terminal window itself. So effectively, I've just created this folder here on my desktop. So if I just drag that over here so you can see it, what I've done within terminal is literally the same as just right-clicking on desktop, new folder, and giving it, this title. That's literally the same thing. So if you're not as comfortable with terminal, then feel free to just right-click on your desktop and create a folder. So what we want to do is we want to create our React application within this folder. So all you need to do is navigate over to the Create React App official GitHub project page and scroll down into the README section, specifically the part relating to creating the project here. We just want to copy this first line and copy that into our terminal or CMD, click return. And how long this takes may depend on your internet connection, maybe also the power of your computer itself. For me, this should be pretty quick, but if it takes a few moments for you, then just pause the video until that's finished. So as you can see, that was pretty quick for me. Now for you, all you need to do is run the project. So if I just show you, if I open up this folder within Finder, it's created a new folder within the folder I created. And this is actually where the the code for our project is going to live. So as you can see, if I just clear this down, I'm currently within my testing with React folder, but I need to be inside this my app folder. So let's do a cd my app. And if I just list the folders within this, you'll see I am within the directory of my application. Now, to run the code, all we need to run is npm start. And when I do that, this obviously has built-in hot reloading, so whenever we make a change, it's immediately updated in the browser. But as you can see, this is our application. This is Create React App. There really isn't much to it, but that's a good thing because we want to build out our own application. So I'm using, as you can see, I am, as I already mentioned, I'm working on Mac, but I'm not actually using terminal. I'm using an alternative to terminal called iTerm. It just has a few features that don't exist in the standard terminal window. So I can, for example, click on Command D, and it just pops up another window on the side. And it's just a little bit more useful to me. So I'm just going to navigate into the same project folder over in this window here. You can just open up a new terminal window, or you can install iTerm yourselves, especially if you're running on Mac. I would recommend that. It's very useful to be able to have one window with two sort of command lines running. So if you have something where you're running multiple processes, it's quite useful to have iTerm over your standard terminal. So what I want to do is I just want to open up our project in our code editor. I installed a shell command so I can actually launch it from the terminal itself, but you can just literally open up your text editor and drag your project into the window. It's literally the same thing. As you can see, you may already be familiar with Create React App, but if we open up our source directory, these are the different files that are created by default. We actually have an app test file here. It's basically just testing that it renders without crashing, but we want to delete a lot of these default files because we just don't need them. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete a couple of these files here. We really don't need them, so I'm just going to delete the logo, for example. I'm going to delete the service worker. I'm probably going to delete the CSS. We don't really need that either. Let's go ahead and delete that. Now, of course, this is going to error, so we need to go back into our JS files here, and we need to update them so that they don't. So we deleted the CSS and the logo. That also means we really need to delete the code relating to them. And then also come over to index.js. We're also importing the CSS file we deleted and the service worker. So we'll also need to delete this bit of code, save that. And as you can see, it's not erroring, but we cannot see anything. Don't worry, that's supposed to happen because we literally don't have anything. But again, if I was to enter something like test and click on save, there you go. So basically what I want to do now is I just want to install the different dev dependencies that we're going to need to actually work with, to actually configure our application for writing the tests that we're going to write. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So I'm just going to end this running from terminal, and I'm just going to install a few dependencies. Now, again, if you installed Node by itself, you'd probably use npm here. I actually use an alternative package manager to npm called Yarn, and I'm going to start working with Yarn. But it's literally, the difference is literally that you will be writing Yarn instead of npm. But I would recommend installing Yarn. It's as an alternative package manager. It's just a little bit better. So let's go ahead and install some dev dependencies that we're actually going to be working with. So I'm just going to say yarn add, and -d says for install these as dev dependencies. We want to install the following. So enzyme. We also want to install enzyme adapter for React. So enzyme React 16. We want to install Jest and also Jest Enzyme. Just click on return. It's going to install those dev dependencies for us. Great. Okay, so let's just clear that down. Now, if we come back over to our text editor and we navigate over to our package.json file, we now have a separate section for dev dependencies where you can see these are the dependencies that we just basically wanted to install. The first thing that we need to do is actually configure Enzyme within our project. Now, the configuration of Enzyme will vary project to project, particularly for your custom projects. However, if you are working with Create React App, then the configuration is very, very easy. All you need to do is navigate over to the src folder. That's our source folder. Create a new file. It needs to be called setuptests.js. In this file, we need to import a few of those dependencies, the first one being enzyme from enzyme. We also need to import enzyme adapter, so we're going to say import enzyme adapter from the enzyme adapter React 16. And then we just get to configure it. So I'm just going to say enzyme.configure. This accepts an object where we will set the adapter to a new instance of our enzyme adapter. And then we want to also disable lifecycle methods, so we'll set that to true. We can then save that. And as you can see, at this point, we've made quite a few changes to our project. As you can see, we are working with Git out the box. Now, assuming that you have Git installed, I think it would be a good time to actually check in some of our code and our changes. So back over in our command line, if we do git status, these are the changes that we've made. So I'm just going to say git add all, clear that, do another git status. So we have added those changes. Let's commit them. So git commit, add a commit message, basic config of our testing and now if I do another git status, you'll see that we are there's nothing to commit. If I come back over here, maybe click on refresh, as you'll see there's no changes. So we have basically committed those changes. Now, just to recap, what we've done so far is we've created the application we're going to be working with in future videos. We've also configured Enzyme, which is the testing utility that we're going to be working with to write our tests. Now, the next thing that we're going to be doing is actually writing those tests, but that is going to be in the next video of this tutorial series. But before we get there, I want to just push the work that I'm doing as I go through the series so that you can actually go to a public repository on GitHub and download, look at the code that I've committed yourself. So let's go ahead and push that code. So I've already set up a repository. So I'm just going to go ahead and push that code. Now, as you just saw, I pushed the code to an official GitHub repository. Now, there will be a link to that repository in the description of this video. However, if you would like to navigate to our official GitHub page, then just visit github.com/simpletut, and you can find the repository that I just pushed to here pinned on our home page, where you can find testing React and Redux with Jest and Enzyme. Now, as I go through this tutorial series, I will be pushing my code to this repository. So you can actually come here if you get stuck at any point and actually look at the code that I have written in this series. Alternatively, you could just clone this repository and look at how I've written the tests, etc. It's really up to you. But this is a great resource for you if you are interested in not only following along with this series, but actually looking at the code I've written perhaps in a finer detail. Again, I would also like to take this opportunity to encourage you to fork, and watch this repository. Of course, your support really helps us deliver more content to you. And of course, when we know exactly the content that is most liked by our viewers, that's going to encourage us to create content more specific to those topics. Of course, also you can follow us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/simpletut. This is a great way to stay in touch with us as we release new content. We will be posting it here. Of course, you can visit our official YouTube channel. You can do that by just clicking the channel below this video, or you can navigate again to youtube.com/simpletut, and you can browse around our channel. As I said, I will be creating a playlist for this series, which will be a really easy way for you to find the videos in this series should you need to. Also visit our Simpletut GitHub page, not only for this project and repository, but we have other React-based repositories, for example, the Universal React Apollo registration system. Of course, also a Redux alternate version here, which has a separate Node.js backend, a RESTful API service. We also have a starter kit for building an Electron React Redux desktop application. And again, many of this content, which you'll find on all of our various channels through social media and, of course, GitHub itself.